Hey y'all, welcome to Convos with Bree, Bree. Today is day 31, y'all. 31 days of the visibility challenge. And that's a full month. Today, I want to talk about something that I struggle with personally very deeply in this life. And that is knowing when to walk away, knowing when to understand that staying in something is not helping me. It's really tough, especially when you do what I do, or you do things like I do. You understand things like I do. And a lot of you will know what I mean by that right away. You love people, you understand humans, you understand the depth that makes up who we are. The traumas, the triggers, the experiences, the hurt, the loss, the grief, the fear, the protective strategies, all of these things. And so you just want to keep allowing these things because you don't want to hurt the other human, even if they're hurting you. It's almost like you, at least for me, I understand my part. I understand where I can use things to grow as well and develop a deeper understanding. I understand where love and empathy can change these situations. And I've seen it time and time and time again. But then I start to look at it because I've also struggled very much with this throughout my entire life. I've given chances where I shouldn't have. I thought love could change things where they didn't. Um, I've been in some very tough situations. And while I wouldn't change any of it, because the amount of learning that I did throughout all of it made me who I am right now. But it has me looking at certain aspects of it. And I wanted to look at why it feels so hard. Well, I know in a lot of aspects of my life, I'm really great at this. Professionally speaking, I've gotten extremely good at this. I know how to use my words and I know how to read between the lines and I know how to decipher what is real and what is fake in a job sense. I know if I am working for a boss that will take advantage of its employees and not do the things that they say, I can pick up on that instantly and I can get myself out. I do this a lot when it is a little bit separated from my sense of self. Where it gets tricky for me is people that I love or respect so much that I don't want to be another person that like gives up on them in a sense. That's how I've always felt. I don't want to leave them alone. I don't want to miss my lessons either. I know that a lot of the time I'm challenged to see if I can find more compassion, more softness, more empathy. But I also know that that's such a fine line between trauma and trauma bonds and having there's a lot of labels I could slap on this particular area in the psychology field. But is it truly something that is coming from a learned hurt response? Or is it really worth like staying in this? And are they really going to change? And I had a really good friend growing up that gave me a hard lesson in this. He, I thought, would never hurt me. I thought he would protect me to the ends of the earth, and I would do the same for him. And then one day, he put me in a situation I never saw coming, and it was all at his hands. I was absolutely devastated. He put me directly in a terrible position. I got out of there, of course, and thankfully I got to see the true colors of not one but two people in that. And one was great and one was not. And it was not the way I expected it to go. And I still forgave him and I still let him back in a lot, but not in the same capacity. He taught me how to distance myself from our friendship. He taught me how to see him clearly in real time. It's not that he was not capable of everything that I could see on him and who he was in so many of these beautiful moments with me. It's that he also had his struggle side where nobody mattered. And I could not walk around with this sense of, oh, he loves me so much, he would always protect me anymore, because he showed me that he would not. He showed me that there were quite a few ways to break our bond for him. And I was really hurt for a really long time about that. But then I started to notice all the pressure that I put on him to be the version of himself that I saw him as, who he was when it was just the two of us, who I knew him to be. But when I saw him in the world interacting with everyone else, he wasn't that person. I saw that too, but I ignored it because in my brain, that's just who he had to pretend to be. That's not who he really was, because that wasn't who he was with me. But the thing is that it was all sort of real and it was all sort of fake. Multiple things can be true. What my part in it was, what I needed to learn to do better was not to love him more or take on my own personal responsibility for what was happening. My personal responsibility was to myself. Why was I allowing somebody to be so weaved into my life that was so quick to not treat me well? Who was so in their own hurt, in their own pain, in their own experiences that they didn't think about anyone but themselves. Why wouldn't I allow myself to just see that he could also be this selfish human being? Why didn't I step back and assess what I needed, what I wanted, what I felt I deserved, and do work around that then? Instead, I gave all my energy to this make believe scenario. Well, who is he if I leave? Well, what happens to his life if he doesn't have me? I was his only safe space to land at the time. And that went on for years, where we would take space and then he would call me up out of the blue. I would let him back in. I would think it was different, and it wasn't. But there was this little piece of me that always knew that one day it would be different. One day it would be different. But I realized that didn't mean I had to keep letting him in the same capacity. I didn't have to keep giving him the same energy. All I really had to do is, when we crossed paths, show up nice, show up kind, show up me, right? But that didn't mean I owed him a friendship. That didn't mean that I owed him my time or my energy or any of it. And I found one day, finally, when I was in my early 20s, y'all, I mean, we had known each other our entire lives at this point, and it took me so long to finally understand that until I cut this cord, it would never stop happening. And he came into where I was working, and he not only put me in danger, but he put himself in danger. He put everyone around in danger. And I ended up having to call the police on them, on his friends and him. And it was terrible. It was a really hard spot for me to do that. And he was so angry at me that I did that. But it literally was what I had to do. They were out of control. They weren't listening. There was, of course, substance abuse involved. And he wasn't him. I didn't know this person. And after this all happened, we sat down and we had a conversation. And I told him that we were not friends anymore and that we were not, if we saw each other, if our paths crossed, it was over. It was never going to be like it was. And he just said, "That's fine with me. Peace." And we went our separate ways. And I was upset that it didn't hurt him more. I was upset that I had hung on for so long and it didn't even faze him. And in that moment, it was crystal clear to me. I had been responsible for my own hurt in this for all these years, hanging on the way I was and intentionally, while unintentionally, giving him this much power over my life, my thoughts, my actions, my choices. That's where all this hurt was coming from. I was tethering myself to a lot of people who said they needed me, but I didn't need them. They were not bringing anything to my table. They were not building anything in my world. They were just sucking all my energy dry. And they knew I was nice. They knew that I would be there. They knew that I was somebody they could do that with. I was making myself a target and calling it love. And it didn't stop there because I got him out of my life, but then everybody I seemed to date was him in a sense. And I found myself in very unfulfilling relationships full of cheating, lying. And it wasn't until I found myself in an abusive relationship, which I never thought I would end up in, that I realized this was all tied together. This is something that I'm doing internally, what I'm calling in, what I'm attracting. I had the wrong notions about love and what love truly was. I don't think that anyone is perfect. And that's why it's such a tricky slope because people are going to mess up. We are on this journey called life, y'all, and things will come up. And we have it so much more complicated than I could even put into words on this podcast right now. But the things that we must experience while we're here, the ways that we learn, the things we go through, I truly don't believe that most of the things that hurt us are intentional. I truly think that they're hurt and pain and grief wrapped in survival mechanisms. And a lot of the programming is just out of whack. A lot of us learned the wrong format. A lot of us just didn't get the proper techniques when we were so little and we were developing. And it shaped us in this way that made things that aren't normal seem and feel normal. And so instead of saying, this isn't how life has to be, we said, we can heal these things. We can fix things here. We can be this thing that changes. And it does change, which makes it extra hard. That friend I talked about, he did eventually come back into my life and he did become a version of himself that I always knew that he could be. And we have regained a sense of friendship. And while it's completely different, he doesn't have any power over me anymore. I understand that we can ebb and flow, and he doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't have to be anything, and I don't have to. I know. It's not that I don't have to. It's that I know I can trust myself now to know if something is real or not with him. And he doesn't he's not in my world where he could come in and hurt me the way he could before. And I can trust my feelings on, is that why he's here again? And my gut says no. My gut says this is really everything coming to fruition. And so when we do see each other, it can be great. When we have conversations, they are great. But then we can go our separate ways and we don't entertain each other's energy or thoughts, actions, all that like we used to. We no longer have that tether that keeps us hurting each other and putting up with this shit. But he did also tell me how much it meant to him that I've always known that this side of him existed. And when I officially let him go, not when we had the conversation, it was after we had taken time apart and after I started being aware of how much he still entered my thoughts, my worry, how much I still felt myself worrying about him and for him and wanting to check up on him and all of these things. Every time I was aware that that is how I was thinking, that's where my energy and my thoughts were going. Instead of acting on it, I sat in it. I did not check up on him. I didn't ask anybody about him. I just sat in it. And I would breathe and I would think about the really great times that were what have made me form this tether. I thought about who he made me feel like when I was with him. I thought about how much he built the foundation for who I was becoming and all the things that he was teaching me, that his family taught me, all of these things. And then when those good feelings washed over me, instead of instantly feeling sad that it didn't go the way I had wanted it to, the way I'd hoped, I sat in the gratitude of all the good. And then I pictured him. I pictured him happy. I pictured him peaceful. I pictured him in a place where he figured out his life and he figured out a direction that made him feel like he enjoyed being alive, like he wanted to be here. I pictured him surrounded by love, by people that appreciate him, and I pictured him appreciating them back. And it felt so good. And then I let it go because it didn't matter if right then he was happy, if right then he was peaceful. I just knew that if he was meant to, he would find his way. And I wasn't responsible for making sure he got there. His story would play out however it played out. And he was allowed whatever path he wanted to go. And I took all my responsibility to him off the table. And I did this over and over and over again whenever I found myself back in that place of worry, back in that place of fear. And I let him go. I took the pressure off. He didn't have to be perfect. He didn't even have to end up peaceful and happy. if he didn't want to, because the choice was his. But when I was going to think about him, I was going to think about the good times, and I was going to forever be a space that when he crossed my wavelength, I sent him good energy. But that's what it was. It was only energetic. I wasn't giving more of myself. I was not making myself responsible for anything on his journey anymore. And that is when magic started to happen. Not right away, because he totally went the opposite way for a long time. And there was a little bit of time where I thought, oh, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to get there. But he's going to remain there in my world, somewhere bigger than I have words for or explanation for. I knew that there was a version of him that was peaceful, because there was a version of him that I still saw as that little boy who just needed so much more than he got at the start. And at the end of the day, he was always going to be that little boy who didn't have what I had in any sense. And he was always going to be that little boy who just needed love and just needed the chaos around him to stop. And then one day he found his way. And I was blessed enough to be a place where he wanted to come and tell me a bit about the journey and a bit about how he got here and what he's going to do with it. And I see him now. I'm able to meet him brand new. I'm able to meet him without all the past, because I've spent years removing our tether while still finding a way to love and empathy and softness. It's so tricky. And it's why when people come to me and they are in relationships of any kind, with family, with romantic, with friends, with whatever it looks like, when they're having tough times, my first response is always to see if we can bridge the gap. But I also know that there's a good chance that that can't be bridged right now. There's a good chance it can, but it's literally like a 50-50. It could go either way. I've definitely seen more people find their way, though, to a bridge that allows them a friendship in some type of way, whether it's taking space but doing what I did, where they're just kind of loving each other from afar and letting each other be in their own experiences and understanding that their paths don't align right now. Or, they just find a way to say, hey, I love you for all this was, but we're separating. And there's just not all the animosity in it. And I love that too, because I don't think that taking space should ever be out of hate or anger, because I think that hate and anger just festers within us and it takes us all out on all sides. And we can pretend that it doesn't, but I've never seen it not. People are really good at pretending they don't care. And then you hear them talk about it way too much. You feel them thinking about it way too much. They're creeping on their social medias. Anyone that brings them up, that's who they want to be around, because they want to talk about it, but they don't want to feel like they're the ones bringing it up. That is all, and there's many more, but telltale signs that you are not doing as well as you think you are. And I know how tough it is, because sometimes you're right here. You're right on the verge of a breakthrough where things are going to be better than they ever were. And you don't have a crystal ball. There's no way to know which path is the right path. However, there's not really a wrong choice. Obviously, there's paths that have more resistance and harder paths that you may find yourself on. But no matter what happens, you're going to find yourself learning. You're going to find yourself evolving. You're going to find your way through this. And it all leads to wherever you're destined to go. It may just take a little longer. It may just take you through a rocky road. It doesn't mean that you've severed an ending. When we take the pressure off of ourselves and we stay in the present moment, instead of looking at it like, oh no, what's going to happen? What's this future that I'm building? But what about the past? But what about? Get out of these sides over here in the past and the future and come back to right now. When we come back to the present and we say, right now, this is or is not working for me, there's conversations to be had in the present. There's solutions that can be found in the present that only revolve around right now. The hardest part for me is reminding myself that I can trust the journey. I can trust where this will lead. I can trust myself that I will find my way and that life will be beautiful no matter the direction that I take. Because I have faith in myself. I have faith in this life. I have faith in this journey, and it is all for something. And I remind myself every day that absolutely nothing that is meant for me will miss me, no matter where I go.